Alright, about a week ago I announced a Q&A video and today I am here to answer your questions. I will answer all the questions that have been posted, but I will not go into detail into every single one of them. And since we already had the second milestone of 200 subscribers while I was absent, I will also upload a little video compilation of clips I made during my school trip. But let's go. Alright, the first question by the random Marxist is one he writes a lot, and it's him asking if I will ever do a video on Grigory Romanov. And all I can say is that I would do a video if I researched Romanov and I found something interesting about him. So the possibility is there, but I will probably keep on doing the more relevant topics first. But just for the record, that doesn't mean that I reject the idea. I will just do it sometime when I'm done doing everything else. The next one we have right here is Sinforosk asking if I think that the Greater German solution would have been a good idea in the long run. Now, I like to believe that the Greater German solution would have worked out pretty nicely as a world power, especially considering that states like Luxembourg, Switzerland, or Germany themselves are pretty much economic superpowers or economic miracles. But also the unification of smaller, rather irrelevant states like Austria, Liechtenstein and so on is quite nice. And ironically, even though I called myself Austrian Leninist, I identify rather as a German. So I probably wouldn't even mind if there was another unification of Greater Germany. Assuming we are not talking about Greater Nazi Germany, but just Greater Germany as in today's world. And as Sinforos already pointed out, there have been various people that supported a Greater German country. Sinforos also asked me what I think about the South Tyrol situation. Now, the South Tyrol question is a weird and hot topic for every Tyrolean, including myself. Because if you didn't know, I am Tyrolean. Now, to make matters even worse, I live in the red zone that is directly at the South Tyrolean border. Now, one might argue that it's just Austrian pride for me to want South Tyrol back, but everyone wants South Tyrol back. 60% of the people in South Tyrol still speak German, and hell, I want South Tyrol back. But then on the other hand, that might be a threat to Italy, because the more northern you go in Italy, the more prosperous the people are. So that might just be a threat to Italy's economy, but if you asked me, I want South Tyrol back immediately. Especially considering that South Tyrol is a very important part of Tyrol. Because famous Tyroleans like Andreas Hofer have been born there. And now we can't access their birthplaces anymore. Well, unless we cross the border, which is about 20 minutes away. But to answer that, yes, I want South Tyrol back. Give it to me, Italy. And another question that has been asked is what my thoughts and opinions about the refugee crisis are. Now, obviously, all these refugees, be it war refugees or even economic refugees, all of them are victims of capitalism or imperialism. Because if they flee from the bad economic conditions, it's because they are either neo-colonies or because our economy is crushing them. And if they are fleeing from wars, they are really just fleeing from war-waging countries like the US, or US-backed terrorist groups for that matter. But about the crisis itself, I think it is our responsibility to deal with the refugees since we are causing them in the first place. And honestly, most of the refugee crisis is just panic attacks and fear-mongering from the media. But I won't go further into it because this topic would deserve a video on its own. So let's go to the next question. Green Libya is Free Libya is asking how hostile my environment is towards communism. Now, in Austria, a country that has never participated in the Cold War, people don't really have a bad opinion about communism like, example, America has. But basically what this no fucks given mentality does is that people don't really have a strong opinion about communism, but basically most of them rather disagree. But it's not like in America where your entire family might fall apart just because you're a communist or something. And Green Libya also pointed out the Austrian national question again and pointed out Alfred Klar. From what I can gather, Alfred Klar was an Austrian communist that basically was talking about the Austrian national question. But the highlighted text on his Wikipedia page only really show that he disagrees that Austria and Germany should be one nation because of the political and economical development. And although that's a valid point, Most pan-Germanists are talking about the similarities in language, culture, or ethnicity even. But if we consider the different routes that these countries have taken, we can also take into consideration that Austria-Hungary was a multi-ethnicity state, while Germany probably wasn't. So that may be why some pro-Austrians argue that Austria should be its own entity. But I don't really know. Comrade Luca is asking how you get a communist girlfriend. Well, basically, look for a female comrade and get to know her, be a good friend, you know? Normal stuff. But I think we can all imagine that there's gonna be right-wingers boasting around with their basic bitch girlfriends right now. So I think we shouldn't really evaluate ourselves based on a partnership. But to get back to the question, just be nice to other comrades and maybe you find a female comrade. Just make sure that you don't have an SJW liberal girlfriend or some basic right-wing bitch at your side. Comrade Raptor is asking if Trump should be gulagged. Yeah, well, obviously he should be. I mean, most of the people in the American government should be gulagged anyway. And having this messed up version of Mussolini with an ugly wig as a president probably won't help anyone. Second question, what's my opinion on Venezuela currently? Now, recently you hear a lot about the protests in Venezuela, and I'm not quite sure what to think about that. Because from what I can gather, most of the protesters are conservatives or right-wingers that don't want socialism. And I think that we can all agree that in most cases, right-wingers don't reject socialism because it doesn't work, but because they don't like it. And in most ex-socialist countries, the right-wingers are real right-wingers. And I'm not just talking about your pro-life conservatives that think that an 8-week-old fetus looks like a human. And lastly, will I hoard my grain for Comrade Raptor? And I can say, yeah man, I will hoard my grain for the people. Comrade Linus is asking me about my opinion on anarchist Catalonia. But yeah, considering that the anarchists didn't completely overthrow the Catalonian government, I guess you could call them socialist? But in any case, they were leftists at least. But then on the other hand, they were also outraged that the socialists cooperated with the state, while they pretty much did it themselves. But also there was Franco at their doorstep, and I'd rather collaborate with the state than let a fascist win. But then on the other hand, I still don't know much about the Spanish anarchists, the Spanish Civil War in general, because yay, we skipped that in the history lesson and I never looked into it myself until now. But maybe in, I don't know, 1 or 2 years, I might pick up the question or the topic again, and then I might be able to give a more complicated answer. This goes for most questions talking about conflicts and guerrilla warfares, like, I don't know, Peru, Spain, and so on. So if I am talking bullshit about these topics, specifically like these small-scale fights and organizations, then you have to excuse me there, and maybe, I don't know, correct me or something. But let's go on. Mateusz Reziek, sorry for mispronouncing your name, is asking how I became a Leninist in the first place and what my opinions and views about communism and socialism were before I got into it. Now, to really explain how I got into socialism, we have to take 2 steps back. So the first step to socialism I had was reading a book, I think it was called Indiana Jones Chronicles or something, but it was basically about young Indiana Jones, and it was just a spin-off series of books, because I liked Indiana Jones, I read that. And it was an Indiana Jones book, but it was taking place during the October Revolution 1917. So I got into it, I read the word communism, socialism a few times, and I asked my father what it was all about. As you would expect, he gave me the normal, everyone shares the wealth, everyone works the same, gets paid the same, but yeah, it has no incentive, woo-woo. So basically he gave me the normal, normie answer, you know? And from that point I didn't think about it for several years actually. That was until 2016, however. In 2016 I went to Berlin because I wanted to meet a friend of mine I knew for about 1 or 2 years previously. And you may call me a cynical bastard, but seeing the Berlin Wall and learning about East Germany's history really kicked me off to become a socialist and learn about socialism. And in fact, it was only recently that I really started calling myself a socialist as well. I would say that I really became a socialist around February of 2017 when I started learning about the February Revolution, the October Revolution, because 100-year anniversary. I just looked into it because I knew it was the anniversary. And well, I found Lenin, I bought some of his books, and I'm still reading them right now. And there I am, studying socialism, Marxism, also Leninism, and doing this YouTube channel. Marxist Peasant is asking me if I am a member of any communist organizations. And in case I'm not, which ones I support. Now, you may call me an armchair socialist, but I am not in any communist organizations so far. However, I will apply to one this summer. Or at least I will try to apply to them if I can. And that organization is the Communist Youth of Austria, and its higher up party, the Party of Work. Because while they are very underground and unknown parties, they are still doing the best job in trying to go for Marxism-Leninism. Because they support revolution, they support Lenin, they support Marx, they do NATO blockades even. They go to the LLL meetings in Berlin. Stuff like that, And I think that's pretty decent. At least more decent than a communist party, which is in fact more popular, but not really popular outside of one city, which is Graz. But yeah, I am technically not part of any organization, but I will try to join one in the future. Or at least I have considered joining one, if possible. Second question asked is my opinion on the Austrian left. Now, as a socialist, I have a hard time even finding a really left party in Austria, but I guess you could consider the Greens, the Neos, and the Social Democrats left. Although, as far as I know, all three of these parties are technically liberals. But of course, the Green Party is likely the most anti-capitalist, because what capitalists are doing is destroying the environment. But then again, they also focus on more social topics like cyber mobbing and so on. And while that isn't really bad, they aren't really going full anti-capitalist, which is just a characteristic the capitalist left has. Now, while left tendencies like equal pay, equal rights, and so on are becoming more popular in Austria, I wouldn't say that the Austrian left is bigger than the right. I would actually say that they're pretty equal, but I also wouldn't say that the Austrian left is really much to talk about. After all, I still had a hard time even defining left parties at this point. But that's probably just me. Overall, to sum it up, I would say that the Austrian left isn't too great, but leftist tendencies and habits are growing, which is a good thing in some way or another, but isn't really anti-capitalist and therefore still kind of mediocre. Next question is asking if I will do a video about the Austrian Civil War and the history of the Austrian Communist movement. Well, now that you have shown interest, I think I might actually do a video about the Austrian Civil War, because I think it is a very underrated or overlooked war. Especially because a lot of history books don't even mention what even happened in that time, how the Austro-fascists even worked or existed. But if you want to see something like that, I can do that. I will probably do it this summer or release it in a couple of weeks. I don't know, but now that I know that you're interested, I might actually do one of these videos. And the last question is, what do I think about the Syrian Civil War? Now, as an ongoing war that has not been written by the victors so far, the Syrian Civil War is a really complicated thing, especially taking into consideration that ISIS kicked in. Because beforehand, we had Syria and, let's say, kind of violent government against US imperialism. Now, in that situation, you either support a rather brutal government or you support Western expansionism. And although it's a quote-unquote morally wrong thing to do, a lot of leftists support Assad because he opposes the US. But if I had to choose, I'd probably still take Assad as well. Because America as a whole is just such a fucked up mess at this point that you can't even support it anymore. And because Syria and Russia, I think, are trying to work together against ISIS, and they also think that ISIS is a big problem. Especially when Syria has concerning neighbors like Turkey, which is also going in a very suspicious direction with their policies. Next question are my thoughts on Nestor Makhno, an Ukrainian anarchist that has been fighting in the Russian Civil War. Now, obviously, I'd rather support an anarchist than a monarchist or other people from the White Army. So, in context of the Russian Civil War, I like Makhno. But in a context of anarchism or socialism, I'd probably not like him as much. But you gotta say, the Russian Civil War was a crazy war, and I think every ally the Red Army could have gotten is a good one. And I think that the Red Army shouldn't have destroyed the Makhno movement, but rather try to collaborate or negotiate with them. Because maybe, similar to the anarchists in the Spanish Civil War, you could get them or you could trick them into having a government without realizing it. Next question is asking for my favorite anarchist YouTuber. Well, from anarchists, I don't watch too many of them, but I think that one of the guys at Red Star Videos is an anarchist. And since I watch and partially even try to collaborate with Red Star Videos by making thumbnails or something, I would say that they are my favorite anarchist YouTubers. Do I prefer Lenin or Stalin? I'd probably choose Lenin. Next question is my thoughts on the Donetsk People's Republic. Now, I am aware that there's a lot of Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine, and I gotta say that I'd rather support Russian separatists than NATO or EU puppets like Ukraine, especially considering that Ukraine is such a fucked up country overall. Like, Ukraine is arguably the most fucked up country in Eastern Europe. But then on the other hand, I'd also like if all of Ukraine is more pro-Russian and anti-imperialist. But I mean, I guess the Donetsk Republic is the closest thing we get so far, and I guess they are decent enough. And the last question asked here is, how was Vietnam? What did you do there? Now, I guess he was asking about what I did in Vienna and not in Vietnam, because it probably was autocorrect or something. But in Vienna, I didn't do much except like the normal stuff, you know, Madame Tussauds, the Parliament, the UN Council or UN City, you know, all that stuff. Some theaters, musicals, you know, the normal stuff you would do in Vienna. It was kind of stressful because it was a school trip, but if I went there on my own or with my family, I think it would have been a pretty nice one. It was just a bit annoying because of my school class at this point. But it was fine. We did some interesting stuff. At least except in the parliament in the UN city, where they have to make everything sound as if everything was fine and they were doing the right thing. Stick James is asking me if I still think that China is socialist or has gone full capitalist yet. Now, obviously, as you can judge from the praise from liberals, they are definitely going back to capitalism. They are being pretty revisionist at that. But then also, it's Chinese characteristics, okay? They still got socialism in some form or another. And the argument in the second question about capitalism bringing people out of poverty. I think that's pretty hilarious when you consider that revisionist China brought China made in China products and sweatshops and so on and so on. And that's just besides the fact that most people consider everything that a communist country ever had as poverty. And even if people got out of poverty, how many people are they really? Because you gotta consider that, you know, China has about 1 billion people. And I don't think that 1 billion people got out of poverty because of privatization and the fact that there are more millionaires in China now. Or at least I'd doubt so. Lenin is asking me if he can seize my means of productions and only for collectivization. And Nego Nazare is asking me if I am a revisionist, and no. I actually try to move away from any revisionists that I find. Except the living and breathing memes that are market socialists. Although I don't think that market socialists deserve as much shit as they get. Mr. Viziet is asking, in my opinion, how can we get a communist revolution within the USA? Now, he himself also mentioned that it's highly unlikable that there is even a possibility to have a communist revolution in the USA. And you may call me a second or third worldist, but I think that the USA is the last country to have a socialist revolution, just judging from the fact that people barely know the definition of socialism, by the fact that liberals hate socialism, by the fact that conservatives hate socialism, by the fact that everyone in the US pretty much hates socialism. And even in the first world, there's a bunch of countries that I would consider possibly having a revolution, but definitely not America. Comrade Meep is asking, what's my opinion on several Arab leaders? Call me simplistic, call me ignorant, call me oversimplifying, but I think there's about 3 or 4 types of leaders in the Middle East from what I can gather. Firstly, we have the anti-imperialists and relatively progressive leaders. Then we have the US puppets, and then we have the radical Islamists. And now, if we talk about people like Saddam Hussein, a leader that got backed by the US, and when he was done, he was killed, I think it's pretty safe to assume that he was a US puppet. Next one is Gaddafi, the quote-unquote dictator that killed his people, although an UN investigation shows that rebellions started the violence, not him. But then also he exported weapons to Middle Eastern wars, which was a pretty stupid decision, to say the least. Because if there's one generally very stupid thing to do, then it is giving weapons to the Middle East. Because that's exactly how ISIS or Al-Qaeda happened. But hey, money. Right? Right? Now, I don't know about Nasser because I didn't really look into Egypt that much, because Egypt seems like a relatively neutral country in the Middle East wars. But to sum up the question of what I think about Arab leaders, I think it's a bad idea for the US to kill Arab leaders and leave angry young soldiers alone with guns. Because that's how rebel and terrorist groups happen. So basically, we either stop doing regime changes or we stop sending weapons there. Anti-imperialism is asking, what books did I read? Currently, I am still reading State and Revolution, but I am also going to read Imperialism, Highest Stage of Capitalism, What is to be Done, and Das Kapital. Later on this summer, I will look for Foundations of Leninism and maybe a bit of Mao Zedong, as well as the Communist Manifesto and some other works by Engels, of course. Endymion is asking me what I think about Mao and Maoism. Now, as a lot of others agree, I think that Maoism is just a new stage of Marxism-Leninism, or a progressed form. That doesn't automatically mean that I agree with it, of course, but I think it has a right to exist and that it actually is a new stage of Marxism-Leninism. However, I still have to read Mao's theory. And the best introduction to Marxism? Well, I found that introducing someone to Marxism is relatively hard by giving them a book. And if you gave them a book, I think something simple and relatively short like State and Revolution or something like that would likely be a good start. However, until a few months ago, I only learned about Marxism, socialism, and so on through reading on the internet, watching videos by people like the Finnish Bolshevik. And actually, I think watching stuff like Finnish Bolshevik in YouTube videos is one of the easiest ways to introduce someone to Marxism. Because firstly, Marx is a hard read, and other philosophers are also pretty hard reads. And you need some examples and sources to get into it. Therefore, I think stuff like Jason Unruh or Finnish Bolshevik are a good start. Rodrigo is also asking if I am in any communist organizations, and as mentioned before, no, I am not so far. The True Awesome Face Pope is asking if I have heard or read about Hegel and his dialectics. Now, obviously, anyone that has tried to get into the subject matter of Karl Marx has heard about Hegel. Hegel seems to be a big inspiration for Karl Marx, or something he's basing off of. But technically, no, I haven't read Hegel myself. Maybe I'll do that if I got the time, but as I said before, I am still in very early stages of learning about socialism. Actually, like 1 year is not a lot of time, at least for me, because I got into it pretty slowly. But I will remember Hegel and your book recommendation. Here we have another question asking me about several rather trivial rebel groups and so on. And here again, I have to look it up real quick, and so I can't give a really educated opinion because I only heard about it just now. What I can give you an opinion right now, however, is the ongoing People's War in Turkey. I think that an ongoing People's War in Turkey is justified. And if it is the same scenario in the Philippines and the other countries you listed, I would fully support it. Because countries like Turkey are just a complete mess right now. It's a democratically elected dictatorship at this point. And with the likes of Erdogan at the top, we might as well get an official Islamic state. About the government of Nepal, I think it's kind of strange that they still have to deal with kings and monarchies. But on the other hand, we also have like a third of socialists in the government. However, I think that the socialists in Nepal are all part of the second and not the third international, which isn't the best, really. But then on the other hand, there's a decent amount of Maoists in Nepal, and they actually try to overthrow the government, which is a brave move in my opinion. It's kind of sad that they lost, but anyway, they tried, and I think maybe if they gain more popularity and try again, they might overthrow Nepal and make a People's Republic, which is very nice. What else do we have? Emperor was also asking what I think of the International Freedom Battalion. And honestly, I'd say Marxist-Leninists fighting Turkey and ISIS sounds like a damn good thing to me. So I am in support of it. And what do I think about the African Socialist Cold War states? Well, obviously, Africa is the continent, and I mean the continent, that is most likely and most beneficial to have a revolution, because they are arguably the most oppressed out of the bunch. And I think the more socialist states exist in Africa, the weaker the West gets, because we don't have cheap labor to supply us anymore. And that would lead to revolutions in the second and first world as well. And although I support all revolutions, obviously, I think that revolutions in Africa, Asia, or South America are always a good start because they are the greater chain reaction of revolutions, you could say. So I think it's a good thing that there is socialist states in Africa. And the last questions for this Q&A are by Palpatine Lover 36. He is asking me if I think that the money system can be abolished immediately after establishing socialism. And if so, what should we replace it with? Now, I think that completely abolishing money directly after the revolution or after establishing socialism might not work out as well as we imagine. Because although I haven't read into the theory of labor vouchers or whatever you could replace it with so far, I think the money itself isn't the problem. I think rather that the economy and the free markets are the problem. Because money is just simply a representation of value used for easier exchange. But then again, I don't know jack shit really. I just try my best to work with other socialists and try to educate some people with my knowledge I have so far. Which also nicely leads to the last question for this video, and it is the bonus question asking me in what grade I am. Now, technically I'm still in 8th grade. However, the grading will finish next week, and we have only 2 weeks later on just doing random stuff. So, technically I am still in 8th grade, but practically I have finished 8th grade already. But as I said, the school year is practically over, and I will be going to a trade academy next year. Okay, this should be it for this video. I am the Austrian Leninist and I will see you in the next one. Thanks a lot for watching. If you liked the video or if you'd like to show support, leave a like and a subscribe below. Also, feel free to post a comment or share this on social media.